Well, welcome everybody to our online program on addiction recovery from the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, BC. And it's been 2 years since we conducted our big year-long research project at the center. And so I thought we'd take some time in this series just to reflect back on it, revisit some of the key themes that we discovered from all this research. And one of the, just to remind everybody about what it was, we studied what influence meaning therapy had on the research participants. So these were clients at the center. And the idea behind this was we have a great deal of knowledge about the theory of what the therapy is supposed to do and all sorts of practical applications. But we didn't actually know what happened in real life. So the idea behind the research was to perform what we call an inductive study, which just means we're just going to take a good look at the clients, what they tell us, what they say helps, what they say didn't help, and from that, figure out exactly what the influence of meaning therapy was on them. So one of the things that we found out, for example, was that with all this research and various sources of information, that three key themes emerged. And the first one was the idea of gaining a more sophisticated and accurate understanding of the self, or what we just called self-definition. So when they went through therapy, they seemed to gain more understanding of who they were as human beings, what was actually important to them, what we call the values, what were their strengths, what were their limitations, how they would make choices in their lives, if they had any sort of paradoxes going on. For example, let's say an important thing for them was education, and another important thing for them was providing for the family. Well, what happens if they decide to go back to school and they weren't making an income anymore? So how would they make a choice in that? And how would they deal with at times in their lives when, for example, there were no ready answers? But so all these kinds of things came up as part of understanding themselves a lot better. And the second thing we noticed was relationships got better. So they formed more positive relationships. And that could include the people, in therapy themselves, but also generally speaking with the family and with neighbors and friends and things like that. And then the third thing was the motivations and goals. And they started to create goals and motivations that were actually based on what was actually important to them as human beings. So these three things were really key. And in fact, it makes a great deal of sense when you think about it, because people with addictions really don't understand themselves very well at all. And so the therapy seemed to reverse that process and give them a better sense of who they were. People with addictions don't tend to have very good relationships. The great psychologist Rollo May said that an addict tries to connect with other people by artificially changing his mood and his feelings. But you can't really connect with another person if only one of them is doing the changing. That's not how the whole thing works. And then this third thing about motivation is most people with addictions, they don't rely on themselves in order to come up with goals, which makes sense because they really don't know themselves very well. So they rely on the outside world. And so these three things seem to, they seem to make sense in terms of addiction. And the other thing we notice about them is that these three ideas on self-definition, relationships, and motivation, they actually match the meaning research. And we're gaining a greater sense that happy people, or people who are contented in life, actually figure out what's important to them and then start pursuing that. And the relationship bit comes in play in the sense of other people help us understand who we are. A lot of who we know about ourselves is formed by the feedback we get from others. So in that sense, these three themes were very important to meaning therapy, and in fact seem to match the meaning literature pretty well. Anyway, that's it for this session. Back next time with part 2.